Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra,
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people.
associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked.
and sometimes what didn't,
You will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts.
And inspire you to do even greater things.
In this episode, I'm in conversation with V Thyagarajan, known as Raja, who's a senior management executive and chief operating officer with nearly 4 decades of experience in the IT industry involving international and multicultural environments. He shares his story, including points related to how his uncle and brother were influential in him getting into software after doing an MS in management, about being part of a team that started a company and being an entrepreneur without knowing it. Some of the pioneering work that he and his team had done in the IT industry by having an approach of creating tools to improve development productivity or products to solve customer problems. And in doing that, how they had to use innovative techniques to create solutions long before others, as well as when there were no standards to do some of these things. Talks about running a company that offered both professional services as well as products, and his own transition from a developer to playing more managerial roles, and some of the lessons learned in being an entrepreneur. He also talks about balancing and prioritizing requests from various users and having a process to build the solution in an evolutionary manner. We also talk briefly about the ways in which software development has changed over the years. And finally, what it takes for someone to shift from a service or a project mindset to a product mindset. Listen on. Hi, Raja. Welcome to the Software People Stories.
Oh, thank you, Shiv. Sure, it's going to be an exciting discussion with you. Yeah, thank you for having me here. Thanks.
I am also looking forward to this. We've known each other for a long time, and I've always admired some of the things that you used to do long back. We can start with you sharing your story. How you got into IT.
I did my MS in IIT Madras. My uncle used to teach in IIT Madras. He was in computer science. My brother was also a computer science person, elder brother. So he was working in software elsewhere. I got influenced that I need to get into software. And this was 1985 and software was still pretty new. So even though I did MS in management, my thesis work was more related to computer science, something related to a combination of management and computer science. Okay. And so once I finished that, my uncle who was teaching actually came out and started his own company. So he asked me to come and join him, and then I just joined. So I didn't even know that I was actually getting into some kind of an entrepreneurship at that point of time. I just went there as a techie to learn things on how to build systems and implement systems for customers and all this. That's how I actually went in, right? So 1985, 86 is when we started this whole thing. I started working for this company. Over a period of time, the initial, of course, almost, I would say about 15 to 18 years, was involved in quite a lot of development work because all three of us were kind of techies. Myself, my uncle, my brother, all of them, because he used to teach computer science. My brother was actually a developer and he used to develop our systems. We were all techies and excited by technology and what it can do and all that. So we were involved in quite a few product development right at the beginning, 87, 88 time frame. Either these are products or these were tools that we can actually that improve your productivity, that make your job of developing some systems easier, those kind of things. Looking back, some of the things that we did at that point of time have all now become standards actually. For example, we developed something called an AT language, where multiple formats of documents, like you have WordStar, you have WordPerfect, you have Excel, you have DBase, you have so many other things. They've all to actually look at them in a common platform. We developed a viewer which basically understands what is called an AT language. So we had a converter which each of these formats would convert them into an AT language, and this viewer would actually display that. Later on, of course, if you had continued to work on that, it could even have become an HTML actually. Some such things actually. You look back and think about all that, you really feel nice. You did think about a lot of things which later on became kind of standard. So there were quite a few that we did at that point of time. So while on one side we were actually developing these products, there are also a lot of systems that we were actually developing for some of the large companies. I mean, we talked about airlines. We did actually do some serious work for airlines. So this was in coordination with one of our partners in Denmark, and we did some big time development in aircraft maintenance. Subsequently, that went on to become trigger something like a BPM, business process management. At that time, we used to only call it as a workflow system, and subsequently it actually became what is called as a BPM now, right? So we were one of the very early companies to venture into document management and workflow systems, and we were more or less seen as pioneers in this area as far as India is concerned. That was way back in 88, 89, 90, and so it was very interesting. Actually, we started getting into that, and it still continues. Our company had two lines of business. One is the services, which is the classic, you do a development, turnkey development for our customers. That is one aspect. The other aspect is actually go and develop your products and implement it for your customers. And today we have, while the services business has kind of wound down and then we have merged with another company, the product development company still runs. We do have the BPM product still running, but it has taken a different shape altogether now because of the cloud and all those PaaS and SaaS and all that. It's taken a completely different route now. So it still runs. We still are actually helping the customers implement that. Now the very large customers are using it now, even today. So over a period of time, of course, till about 2000, 2005, 2003, 2002, I was actually involved in a lot of this development work. So subsequently, because of requirements from the company, I moved into more management, strategies, administration, those kind of. Of course, one of the important aspects of our company was getting involved in process. At that point, today, of course, everything is agile, right? Everybody wants to do agile, so nobody really cares too much about your CMM or ISO or whatever. But those days, those were requirements, and so we had to actually get into those and make sure that we get assessed at certain level as far as CMM is concerned, keep our ISO going. So I was involved in all those kind of things beyond a stage. This is on the software front. Even on the other support activities like the HR and the finance and all that, I was involved in actually setting up the process and making sure that those things are all taken care of actually. So it was quite a journey. You learn a lot of things as you go along. While there are a lot of these good things that you want to remember, there are certain things that really put us back as well. Growth is one of the key factors. Especially at that point of time, we were actually considered to be 5 years behind Infosys. So Infosys started around in 1980, 81, and we started sometime in 85. And till about 95, we were actually 5 years behind in all aspects, including the revenue actually. So it was very exciting at that point of time to actually dream big. Yes, we can actually become another Infosys. So that's how it all started. But unfortunately, there are certain things that didn't work out, or maybe the things that we did, which were, looking back now, we know we could have done it differently, right? For example, one of the aspects that we did is we diluted too fast, brought in too many shareholders into the company, which we should have avoided. We should not have done that, because we have then pulled in different directions, because they all have a limited period interest, right? 2 years, 5 years, maybe, and then they want to get out, right? So there is always a problem there. So I think we made a mistake of diluting our company too soon, too quickly, actually. So I think that was one of the mistakes that we made. The second mistake also, we didn't know which company we need to really look up as mentors or look up to and say, okay, I want to become this. So Infosys is one company, of course, everybody looked up to Infosys, but our size, somebody who is growing at a reasonably high rate. So you look at some companies and then say, okay, I want to actually become like that. We looked up to some of the wrong companies, right? Now, what happened is basically, when you look at their history, how they grew and all that, later on you find, I'm sure you must have heard of those areas, those times when the laws were still not very tight. The STPI was still trying to put things under some kind of an umbrella control. There are a lot of loopholes, and people, some of the companies, they seem to have actually exploited all these loopholes and then said, okay, I'm actually 100 crores, 200 crores, 2000 crores, whatever. In reality, they're not that. Right. But we didn't know all that. So we were thinking, I mean, we should really become like that. No, those were some of the things I think which really put us back. It's really important for you to really identify whom you want to follow and make sure that you have your own individuality also. Ensure that you want to do what you want to do and achieve what you want to. But of course, you need to look up to certain individuals, certain companies to take the step because they have succeeded. Right. So this is something. So there are few things that we actually faltered in those areas, basically. So that put us into certain difficulties, and because of that, we had to do certain things. And now, like I said, because we also diluted too soon, there are a lot of pressure from the shareholders as well. So those are things that actually pull you back. While you want to actually move forward, there are things that actually pull you back. I wish I could actually learn all the lessons that I learned in these. I'm able to implement somewhere else now and make it more smoother. But I don't think I'm at a situation now where I could actually do that.
Yeah, a very, very interesting journey. Just to respond to the last one, I think you can still mentor others. Starting out now, I think at the time when you started, I think the term startup was also not popular or not fashionable, I would say. Yeah. It was there. Nowadays, everybody wants to be called as a startup. And
one of the reasons why I'm kind of still employable is because of all the experience that I've gone and I've had. And people, like you said, I won't say mentoring really. I mean, I'm sure there are people who have their own ways of doing things, and there are various sources from where they can actually learn things. But of course, my experience is important, and that's one of the reasons why I'm actually working with this company now and trying to help them run this offshore. That's definitely that. The current promoter is also kind of interested in some product development as well. So some of the difficulties that I've faced because we have services and products together, I think that is one of the biggest lessons I have learned, that you don't have products and services in the same company. I think that is that actually doesn't give you a clear indication of how these two are doing, because you always mix it up and you always have not a very optimized resource allocation in terms of what you want to do, how you want to sell these services and products. There's always a problem there. So I think that is one of the important lessons that I learned, that you don't have product activities and services activities together in the same company. You need to really separate them and have them handle them separately. I think that is one of the reasons, one of the lessons that I've learned. Because as a services company, we have done very well. I know that we've had good success in services, but because it was actually the product has its own way to monetize, its own way of selling the market. So to mix the two, it becomes a major problem for us. I think that is one of the reasons. So if suppose the current promoter is also interested in actually products, but then at least in that experience, I can actually make sure that now it's translated to the current promoter.
Yeah, in fact, you preempted one of my questions, saying that how do you balance this tussle inside the company between product and service?
It's a massive mistake, actually. I think it's a massive mistake because one is the money that you make in services, you actually try to invest in the product. And the product has its gestation period, which is its own gestation period. So you invest 1, 2, 3, 4 years there. All the money that you make here, you actually take it there. You are not able to grow your services because then there's not money available in the services. There's no reserves available here for you to grow the services as well. So it kind of becomes a catch-22 situation. You don't know what to do there. So you deal with products separately, have its own investments coming in, and even selling is different. I mean, it's not the same. How you sell your products is different from how you sell your services. And so you can't have the two teams mixed because of that. So I think that was a big mistake that we made.
And the temperament of the teams also, the team members. I've seen some places where there's a lot of tension, saying that
yeah, it's a major problem, especially if the product is not earning revenue, right? Now the services people will always have that mentality saying, I'm actually funding them. I am earning, and then I am actually paying the salaries for the product development team. That's a major issue actually. So all your HR is a problem. Now I need to make sure that my services people are, they have a career path, right? And if I have the same career path there in the product, then it becomes a different problem, because there's always a friction there as well. Why is he getting a promotion? Why is he getting an increment? And all kinds of things, actually, So it becomes it's a major problem.
Stepping back a little bit on the product side, in fact, that was also one thing that I wanted to talk about, which you mentioned. You are probably among one of the, I would say, pioneers in the, at least the Indian industry, very early on, deciding to develop products or product-based solutions.
Absolutely.
Imaging.
I mean, we were considered actually in the document management and workflow area. We were actually considered as the pioneers. Not very many people locally. Of course, you had large companies like IBM and Oracle. They had their own suite of products. But in India, I think we were very early into the game, actually. I mean, it was successful. We had quite a few implementations going. Some of the customers, even today, they use the existing version of the product now. So the product now is completely different. I mean, if the current person who is managing the product development, he comes to know that you're calling it as the new version of the old product, then he'll be actually livid. Because he knows how much effort he has put in to actually make it what it is today. So, but yeah, but the customer remains. The same customer actually uses it. So they have graduated into the newer version now. So that's very exciting. Very nice to see all that, actually.
Yeah. So how did it all start? And was it something that you felt that this is a solution, or this is a problem that needs to be solved, or is this based on different requirements that you had to service and thought that you could probably generalize or abstract it? Now, how did this whole evolution or becoming a product happen?
See, it's I think, again, like I said before, now we are basically techies. So what excites us is the technology. That's how it started. In fact, I'll just give you an example. One of the Indian companies had a huge amount of code in a language called CPL1. It is basically a subset of PL1. Okay, and CPL1 was something which was actually dying down at that point of time as well. That was in 1986, 87. And they came to us and said, "Can you help in converting all the CPL1 code to C?" Right, at that time, C was the major thing, actually. So, I mean, one approach we could have taken is just go through the code, rewrite everything, saying, okay, this is the C code, and just keep on doing it. Every function you take, and then try to come up with something. Of course, the CPL1 was a more complicated language. For example, you have something called a sub-function, right? You can call the same function, but it actually gets executed from somewhere in between the function, not from the first line. So those kind of complications were there in the language, actually. So we decided, okay, let's not actually go through a process of arduous process of actually going and coding everything again. So we developed a converter, a CPL1 converter, CPL1 to C converter. So which basically takes the input of a CPL1 code and then generates a C code, actually. Okay. So that was a very, so our mentality was product mentality. Anything that you want is to be generic. So the same thing, we actually used it for Fortran to C. In fact, a government organization came to us and said, we want to convert a lot of Fortran code to C code. So we kind of used the same thing almost, except that the input language is different here. So we had to just do that part alone for Fortran and then make it migrate it to C. Okay, so that we did, actually. So our general tendency was to make something generic. So very similarly, one of the customers came and said they want to. This is actually for investigation, crime. So it was, again, obviously something to do with government. So they wanted to store all their documents related to various crimes and investigations and all that, and be able to access them even to the extent that they can actually present these as evidences in the court, so that they don't need to really take the originals with them, because originals could actually get lost. Somebody might steal them. Because ultimately, the originals have to be shown for at that point of time, at least. After the judgment is given, maybe, or just before the judgment is given, they're supposed to go and show the originals. But until then, they can always do with the electronic format, right? So they came and said, "Why don't you develop something for us?" So then we said, "Okay, why not? Why not?" The same thought again. Why go through just a simple database and say, "Okay, I will just store all the documents and allow them to." So we said, "Okay, let's develop a document management system," because at that time, paperless office was considered as a luxury, right? Everybody wanted to go for paperless office, right? So that's how it started, actually. So we developed something which could have been, which can be generic and can be implemented, can be used in multiple situations. We implemented this for them, but then we developed it in such a way that it can be a product. And so, go and implement it for multiple. In fact, one of the very early stages of, obviously at that point of time, we didn't have all these test cases and quality and process and all that. The developers basically develop and test it, right? So we developed it in our local area network. So we developed everything there. Everything was working all right. And then we got an order from one of the automotive companies in Pune. So we went there and implemented it. The first execution, it would never start. So I was just wondering what happened. It would never come up actually. So I was just wondering what was happening. So, but I knew there was something wrong that's happening. So I immediately rebooted the system. I didn't want to take longer because I don't know, maybe it's actually going and cracking the disk. I don't know what was happening. So I just rebooted the whole thing. Then when I went in and saw the debug the code, the difference was in the network, you don't get this dot and dot dot. And when you look at the directory, you don't get dot and dot dot, right? Whereas when it's an individual desktop, you get this dot and dot dot. So what happened is there is a temporary directory that we create. So every time the system actually starts, it first goes to the temporary directory, it deletes all the files, right? So it reads everything. All the files are deleted. If there is a directory, it will actually change directory there and then delete everything. So a dot dot would actually go to the previous directory. Started deleting all the files there. So it was a mess actually. So things that it was interesting actually. You find such things happening, and it's a way how the product actually evolves for a period of time at that point of time. So that was So that's how it actually started. So we designed it in such a way that it has to be a product because our mentality is basically product mentality. We want to do something which is more product. It helped in a way initially, but then subsequently we should have actually thought of a different way of exploiting it, which we didn't. I think that is where we failed.
Yeah, this is one of the most frequently quoted situations when you talk about DevOps, saying the developer says works on my machine.
Yeah, it doesn't happen here. I'm not getting that error, right?
So the next related question is deciding on, let's say, the feature set or kind of a roadmap when you say product. When you have requests from different customers, different priorities, how do you normally prioritize or how do you sequence and take things up?
Of course, those days, we didn't have a release plan. We wouldn't say that once every quarter or once every month, I will actually release a version of the product. It was not that way actually, or until we actually started looking at process as an important aspect of running your business. Until then, it was not there as part of our operations. That every once in every 6 months or every 3 months, I actually release a version. In case there are any serious problems, then you just release a patch or something like that. It was not there until then. So every time a customer comes and says, I have a problem, then it actually becomes a new version. Or every time the customer comes and says, I need this particular feature, if at all I want to use the system, then it becomes a new version. That's how it was until we actually went into a process mode, right? Once we had the process mode, of course, it was different. We used to get, obviously we have a mechanism to collect all the requirements. Our salespeople go out and talk to prospects, even our customer support people talk to the customers who are using it, their problems. So then it becomes a normal process of actually getting all these, accumulating all these features, new requests and issues, and then try to schedule your releases as based on that actually. So in most cases where the sales is the important aspect, because once the customer is a customer, then you can always say, okay, they can wait until the next release. But a customer will not become a customer if he doesn't see something next day, right? It's always a problem. So we used to have some crude ways of getting things done and then showing it to him. But then we actually make sure that it becomes a part of the main product at a later stage, actually. So that's how it is. And we did when initially it was developed using the C and Windows development, the SDK, Windows SDK and all that. Then later on, we actually moved it to Visual C++. So we kind of had that kind of a roadmap as well. So from a technology point of view, also we kind of caught up with whatever was the latest and try to get in there. And then there was one situation where we said the product has to be completely revamped. And that is when the current version of the product actually started. So the revamp is when we said, okay, this has to now become a part of a standard. We need to look at standards. There are BPM, BPL standards. They're all there now. Now, until then, we didn't have any, we were not really looking at any standards, how the documents are stored, how the collaboration happens amongst different people, what data you actually pass, how it actually integrates with an external system. All that was not thought of as, it was there, but not following any particular standard, right? XML or whatever. I mean, at that point of time, whatever was there, we didn't actually have all that. But when we decided to actually revamp the entire product, we actually took care of all that, basically. So that is the reason why we had to really do a revamp of the entire product, and then went for a completely new technology, new ideas, new architecture of the system, basically. Yeah.
Yeah, very nice. In fact, I liked when you mentioned that once you have a customer, and if they are able to accept some various plans and all that, that is actually a very strong customer relationship.
Absolutely.
And they also become partners in your development.
Absolutely, yeah.
In
That is
that
correct.
situation, how important is it? And then if it is, and how do you actually create this culture of understanding and empathizing with the customer in your entire team? Because it is not only the salespeople or the leaders.
Absolutely. You're right. In fact, the early stage, I mean, I was one of the key developers of the product, actually, right? And so initially, I would say there are two stages. The first stage is the stabilizing stage, when there are a lot of issues with the product. And then, like I said, I mean, like I gave an example before, right? Now, I have to actually get involved right there. I used to visit all the customers. If they are facing any problems, I wouldn't just leave it to somebody else to just take a look and then see what is happening. I used to actually go customer hopping, trying to understand what the problem is, trying to diagnose the problem, and then sort it out for them. So it was attention that was given right from the top to the customers. Okay. Subsequently, of course, we developed a lot of tools that will help us in diagnosing the problem, making sure that the customer is able to at least transmit things in a way that will help us diagnose the problem. And there are a lot of tools that we actually develop that will, those days, of course, there are no, today what you see in Oracle and, SQL Server and the kind of things that you have, those days we didn't have all those tools. Now today, we actually developed some of those tools to give us an understanding of the internals of the usage, in terms of how the database is, whether there's any break within the database, all that. Or even, for example, there used to be a debug version of the product. So you actually go and make a small change in the settings, then it suddenly gets into a debug mode, and then it actually throws up a lot of logs and all of that, which basically is transmitted to us. And we are able to look at those and then give them solutions. Right? Of course, it was tough because there was no internet, no nothing. So we had to physically go and do certain things. If at all we need to get a dump, we need to go there physically and get it, or they need to courier it to us, or we need to basically courier it to them. So all those were tough things, but we kind of managed through whatever we can do at that point of time. We were able to do all that.
Yeah, this reminds me of probably what I studied in computer science, data structures, algorithms, and then trying to debug with system dumps and trying to.
Absolutely, yeah. Hex dump was one of the very important tools those days, actually, that will help us to identify anything. Now, what is the format of WordPerfect file? I used to use the hex dump and find out. So very interesting.
From there, today you also mentioned Agile. Everybody wants results very quickly. And right from the customers to the developers, and also this urgency that you find in startups, saying that we have to release something, the MVP.
Immediate, yeah.
I still haven't understood why should it always be minimum viable product. I mean, it should still be a viable product.
Viable product, okay. I understand.
So, are you seeing any changes in terms of, say, how software is being developed, both in terms of the complexity, because nowadays it's probably more of ecosystems that you tie into. I mean, you don't develop everything yourself. To the other side of, earlier there used to be these light bulb kind of jokes saying that how many software engineers do you need to change a light bulb? And I say always two, because one will quit in the middle of the project. So that kind of handling attrition, etc., but still assuring the services to your customers. Do you see any changes in terms of how the industry has evolved?
Definitely, it has changed. There are the number of factors which has actually enabled the change. One is, of course, what you see today is the technology itself. Now, you talk about most of the development happens in PaaS, right? The platforms like Salesforce or ServiceNow or any of those things, right? And that's how we are moving now into those kind of situations, right? So that is definitely that has helped, that has changed the way you actually approach your development, because a lot of things are taken away by the platform that you're using today. A lot of things happen there in terms of your architecting, in terms of a design, how things are actually done. Everything is done there, right? The second, of course, is it's an unfortunate thing actually. Google, if you go to Google and then search for something, that you definitely get something, right? You have a problem, you want a solution, you describe your problem in some way, you will definitely get a solution there. But the issue, of course, is today's developers is they just take the solution, they try to implement it as is, without really bothering to adapt it to what you want. So that really causes a lot of issues today. So the problem is more there in terms of how they understand, how the developers understand customer requirements, the system, the way the system has to behave, and whether it is holistic in all aspects. They refuse to actually look at that and just take it and then try to implement it, and then it works because there is always a positive test case that you put there, and then it works. But the moment there is something which is different, something which is not expected by the code, it actually fails, right? And then when it happens in production, or when it happens when the customer is looking at it, it becomes an embarrassment for the company team. So there are certain aspects, there are challenges which are different today. You need to basically, so it's no longer the process. Process is taken away by all those Jiras and the tools, the JMeters and whatever tests and all those things integrated, and your DevOps, obviously, all that is actually so the process itself is not a major issue these days, because they all go for agile, and then it's all 1 month, 2 weeks, 1 month cycle that you work about. So, but to actually come up with what you want in those 2 weeks or 4 weeks is a big challenge actually, and for developers to understand that and do it is again a bigger challenge than that. So I think that there are different kind of challenges, but yes, there are challenges. How you handle those things today, yeah.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I didn't realize how long we've been talking. I will ask one of my favorite questions that I like to conclude our conversations with, but with a slightly different twist. For either individual contributors or managers who have been in the service side of business, if they are looking at, say, switching over to a product company or a startup, what would be your advice?
For me, of course, I do have experience in both. Services, obviously, you are looking at something which is it's a narrow thing, right? You have a customer, the customer says there are certain things that he needs, and then you provide him a solution, you are done, right? So you follow all the agile methodologies, the testing and all that, make sure that the requirements are taken care of, and then you basically deliver it to the customer and he's happy with that. But here on the product, you are actually looking at somebody, an unknown customer or an unknown set of customers. So challenges are different. How you actually arrive at what your product actually should contain, right? What you have is a comparable product, and you want to make sure that your product is something different from the comparable product, right? So it's ideation becomes a major challenge as far as products are concerned, because any idea that you come up with, you go on Google, you find out 100 people who have already tried that. And so to actually come up with something which is new, either because it is a completely new in terms of what it offers, or it is new in terms of how you offer it to the customer. Right? That becomes a challenge actually. And you are looking at customers who are not your customers. You don't even know them. So how do you basically understand the challenge and then be able to do it? So it is definitely, there is a different need, different requirement as far as moving into a product mode. From a service mode, if you want to move into a product mode, the thought process is completely different actually. And so to be able to actually conceptualize your product and be able to come up with something which is, the way you deliver it to the customer is definitely challenging actually. So you need to spend your time obviously in that. But unfortunately, the product also there's a window of opportunity. You cannot miss that, right? So you need to keep all that in mind. The window of opportunity and your the way you actually ideate and get what you need to do, and also to see how you can deliver it to the customer. In the process, make money for the customer for yourself. So it is a challenge actually. It's a big challenge. So it has to be a completely different mentality when you actually get into a product mode from a service mode. Service mode is today. So today's technology, today's requirement, I'm able to give, everything is fine. But when you get into a product, you're not looking at just today. You're looking at tomorrow, day after tomorrow, not just the requirements, also the product, the technology, because you need to keep with the technology, how it's going to grow. And so you cannot be redeveloping your product every time the technology changes, right? So you need to make sure that those things. So both there's a challenge as far as technology is concerned. There's a challenge as far as business is concerned when you're getting into product mode. Whereas in services, it is, I think, more the challenge is more in finding customers. But once you find a customer, then it is fairly clear. Actually, the definition is very clear how you actually handle it. So that's what I think.
Good. On that note, we're really out of time for this conversation, Raja. Thanks a lot for sharing your experiences, particularly the lessons learned and what you would probably do differently if you were to do it again.
Thank you for giving this opportunity, Joe.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People Stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.